Hello everyone, and welcome back to Wiki Whisperer, Articles Aloud. My name is Adrian Curo, and I will be your host. Now, this is a show where I select a Wikipedia article at random, or by request, and I read it in its entirety. Now, to keep with the spirit of authenticity, as if I was truly reading to you, I've decided to do this show in one take. No cuts, no edits. That means all stutters, misspoken words, and errors will be kept in, which I apologize for in advance. Today's article is about sauerkraut. Let's begin. Sauerkraut is finely cut raw cabbage that has been fermented by various lactic acid bacteria. It has a long shelf life and a distinctive sour flavor, both of which result from the lactic acid formed when the bacteria ferment the sugars in the cabbage leaves. Although it is considered a national dish in Germany and is known under its German name in English-speaking countries, it did not originate in Germany and is also a traditional and ubiquitous dish in Central and Eastern Europe. Overview and history. Fermented foods have a long history in many cultures, with sauerkraut being one of the most well-known instances of traditional fermented moist cabbage side dishes. The Roman writers Curo, in his De Agricultura, and Columella, in his De Re Rustica, mention preserving cabbages and turnips with salt. Popular folklore has imagined that sauerkraut was introduced to Europe by the trade networks formed across Eurasia by the Golden Horde. However, according to Mack and Serena, 2005, there is no evidence to support this theory, nor any evidence that fermented cabbage arrived from an East Asian source, and there is evidence of sauerkraut production in Europe dating back to the early period of the Western Roman Empire. Although sauerkraut is from a German word, the dish did not originate in Germany. Some claim fermenting cabbage, swan kai, was already practiced in the days of the building of the Great Wall of China. However, the Romans, as previously noted, pickled forms of cabbage and were the more likely source of modern-day European sauerkraut. It then took root in Central and Eastern European cuisines, but also in other countries, including the Netherlands, where it is known as Zuurkool, and France, where the name became Choucroute. According to Mack and Serena, the Slavic peoples of Europe likely discovered fermented cabbage on their own. The English name is borrowed from German, where it means sour cabbage. The names in Slavic and other Central and Eastern European languages have similar meanings with the German word fermented cabbage. Before frozen foods, refrigeration, and cheap transport from warmer areas became readily available in Northern, Central, and Eastern Europe, sauerkraut, like other preserved foods, provided a source of nutrients during the winter. Captain James Cook always took a store of sauerkraut on his sea voyages, since experience had taught him it prevented scurvy. The word kraut, derived from this food, is a derogatory term for the German people. During World War I, due to concerns the American public would reject a product with a German name, American sauerkraut makers relabeled their product as Liberty Cabbage for the duration of the war. Production. Sauerkraut is made by a process of pickling called lactic acid fermentation that is analogous to how traditional, non-heat treated, pickled cucumbers and kimchi are made. The cabbage is finely shredded, layered with salt, and left to ferment. Fully cured sauerkraut keeps for several months in an airtight container stored at 15 degrees Celsius, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, or below. Neither refrigeration nor pasteurization is required, although these treatments prolong storage life. Fermentation by lactobacilli is introduced naturally, as these airborne bacteria culture on raw cabbage leaves where they grow. Yeasts also are present, and may yield soft sauerkraut of poor flavor when the fermentation temperature is too high. The fermentation process has 3 phases, collectively sometimes referred to as population dynamics. In the first phase, anaerobic bacteria such as Klebsiella and Enterobacter lead the fermentation and begin producing an acidic environment that favors later bacteria. The second phase starts as the acid levels become too high for many bacteria, and Leuconostoc mesenteroids and other leuconostic species take dominance. In the third phase, various lactobacillus species, including L. brevis and L. plantarum, ferment any remaining sugars, further lowering the pH. Properly cured sauerkraut is sufficiently acidic to prevent a favorable environment for the growth of Clostridium botulinum, the toxins of which cause botulism. A 2004 genomic study found an unexpectedly large diversity of lactic acid bacteria in sauerkraut, and that previous studies had oversimplified this diversity. Weissella was found to be a major organism in the initial heterofermentative stage, up to day 7. It was also found that Lactobacillus brevis and Pediococcus pantosaceus had similar population numbers in the first 14 days than previous studies had reported. The Dutch sauerkraut industry found that inoculating a new batch of sauerkraut with an old batch resulted in an exceedingly sour product. This sourdough process is known as backslopping or inoculum enrichment. When used in making sauerkraut, first and second stage population dynamics, important to developing flavor, are bypassed. This is due primarily to the greater initial activity of species L. plantarum. Regional varieties. In Azerbaijani, Belarusian, Estonian, Latvian, Moravian, Polish, Russian, and Ukrainian cuisine, chopped cabbage is often pickled together with shredded carrots. Other ingredients may include caraway seeds, whole or quartered apples for additional flavor, or cranberry for flavor and better keeping. The benzoic acid in cranberries is a common preservative. Bell peppers and beets are added in some recipes for color. The resulting sauerkraut salad is typically served cold, as zakuski or a side dish. A homemade type of very mild sauerkraut is available, where white cabbage is pickled with salt in a refrigerator for only 3 to 7 days. This process results in very little lactic acid production. Sometimes in Russia, double fermentation is used, with the initial step producing an exceptionally sour product, which is then corrected by adding 30 to 50% more fresh cabbage and fermenting the mix again. The flavor additives like apples, beets, cranberries, and sometimes even watermelons are usually introduced at this step. Sauerkraut may be used as filling for Polish pierogi, Ukrainian vareniki, Russian pierogi, and piroshki. Sauerkraut is also the central ingredient in traditional soups, such as shichi, the national dish of Russia, kwaśnika, Poland, kapustnica, Slovakia, and zelnaczka, Czech Republic. It is an ingredient of Polish bigos, a hunter's stew. In Ukraine, sauerkraut is known as kysla kapusta, sour cabbage, or kwaszena kapusta, fermented cabbage. In Russia, sauerkraut is known as kyslaya kapusta, sour cabbage, or kwashenaya kapusta, fermented cabbage. In Germany and Austria, cooked sauerkraut is often flavored with juniper berries or caraway seeds. Apples and white wine are added in popular variations. In South Tyrol, it is made with juniper berries, extra virgin olive oil, and smoked pancetta. Traditionally, it is served warm with pork or sausages, accompanied typically by roasted or steamed potatoes or dumplings. Similar recipes are common in other Central European cuisines. The Czech national dish Vepro knedlo zelo consists of roast pork with kedliki and sauerkraut. In Bulgaria, Montenegro, Serbia, Bosnia, Croatia, North Macedonia, and Slovenia, usually the whole cabbage heads are pickled. Such produce is used for many dishes, from a simple salad made of chopped cabbage and sprinkled with paprika, to cabbage rolls. In northern parts of Serbia and Croatia, it is often added to the bean soup. In central Serbia, a local specialty called wedding cabbage is made by slowly stewing roughly cut cabbage with at least 3 kinds of meats: lean, fatty, and smoked. In Romania, the local type of sauerkraut, varsa murata, or whole pickled cabbage heads, are used as a wrap for the national dish called sarmel, a Turkish-inspired roll made of pickled cabbage leaves with minced pork and rice, having its own personality and very distinct in taste from its Ottoman predecessor. In France, sauerkraut is the main ingredient of the Alsatian meal choucroute garni, French for dressed sauerkraut, which is sauerkraut with sausages, Strasbourg sausages, smoked morteau, or Montbéliard sausages, charcuterie, bacon, ham, etc., and often potatoes. In Chile, it is called choucroute and is a common topping for sandwiches and hot dogs, especially for completos. Sauerkraut, along with pork, is eaten traditionally in Pennsylvania on New Year's Day. The tradition, started by the Pennsylvania Dutch, is thought to bring good luck for the upcoming year. Sauerkraut is also used in American cuisine as a condiment upon various foods, such as sandwiches and hot dogs. In Maryland, particularly in Baltimore and on the Eastern Shore, sauerkraut is a traditional accompaniment for the Thanksgiving turkey. As Europeans, especially Germans, emigrated to other countries, many of them continued making and eating sauerkraut around the world. Health effects. Benefits. Many health benefits have been claimed for sauerkraut. It is a high source of vitamin C and K. The fermentation process increases the bioavailability of nutrients, rendering sauerkraut even more nutritious than the original cabbage. It is also low in food energy and high in calcium and magnesium, and it is a very good source of dietary fiber, folate, iron, potassium, copper, and manganese. If unpasteurized and uncooked, sauerkraut also contains live lactobacilli and beneficial microbes and is rich in enzymes. Fiber and probiotics improve digestion and promote the growth of healthy bowel flora, protecting against many diseases of the digestive tract. During the American Civil War, the physician John J. Terrell, 1829 to 1922, was able to successfully reduce the death rate from disease among prisoners of war. He attributed this to feeding his patients raw sauerkraut. Sauerkraut and its juice is a time-honored folk remedy for canker sores. The treatment is to rinse the mouth with sauerkraut juice for about 30 seconds several times a day, or place a wad of sauerkraut against the affected area for a minute or so before chewing and swallowing the sauerkraut. In 2002, the Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry reported that Finnish researchers found the isothiocyanates produced in sauerkraut fermentation inhibit the growth of cancer cells in test tube and animal studies. A Polish study in 2010 concluded that, quote, induction of the key detoxifying enzymes by cabbage juices, particularly sauerkraut, may be responsible for their chemopreventative activity, demonstrated by epidemiological studies and in animal models." End quote. Disadvantages. Excessive consumption of sauerkraut may lead to bloating and flatulence due to the trisaccharide raffinose, which the human small intestine cannot break down. This does not negatively affect long-term health, although it might be uncomfortable. Additionally, sauerkraut has a very high sodium content. The nutritional value per 100 grams or 3.5 ounces of canned sauerkraut, solids and liquids included, is as follows: 78 kilojoules or 19 kcals of energy, 4.3 grams of carbohydrates, 1.8 grams of sugars, and 2.9 grams of dietary fiber, 0.14 grams of fat, 0.9 grams of protein. For vitamins, 0.13 milligrams of vitamin B6 or 10% of your daily value, 15 milligrams of vitamin C or 18% of your daily value, and 13 micrograms of vitamin K or 12% of your daily value. For minerals, 1.5 milligrams of iron or 12% of your daily value, and 661 milligrams of sodium or 44% of your daily value. Other constituents consist of 92 grams of water. Similar foods. Many other vegetables are preserved by a similar fermentation pickling process. Examples include achar in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Pakistan, atsara in the Philippines, brovada in Friuli, northern Italy, curtido in El Salvador, dill pickles in Eastern and Central Europe, encurtido in Central America, kimchi in Korea, silage, a feed for cattle, swan kai in northeastern China, tsukemono in Japan, kabichima in the Caribbean, and kiseli kupis in Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, and Bulgaria. And with that, we complete this week's reading for Wiki Whisperer Articles Aloud on the topic of sauerkraut. As always, I have been your host, Adrian Curo, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy this episode, please feel free to follow the podcast and give it a 5-star rating on whatever podcast directory you may be listening on, as it would really help me out. If you have any tips or words of advice on how I could improve my recording or format, if you would like to request an article for me to read, or if you would simply like to give me some words of encouragement, please feel free to do so by emailing me at wikiwhisperer@gmail.com. That is spelled wikiwhisperer@gmail.com. Stay tuned for next week's episode, and new episodes coming out every Wednesday. All information used on this podcast can be found at wikipedia.org and is available for fair use under the Creative Commons license. And once again, thank you all so very much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.